Hey folks, David Stewart here. It's time for some more comment reading. Still reading comments from the 18th of January 2018. We'll see how hard it is to get through one day worth of comments. So we're going to start with Michael White's comment here on Eagles and Tom Bombadil. That's not exactly how the scene with the Eagles plays out in the book, though. The Eagles expressly say they hated the goblins and wanted to spoil their fun with the dwarves. They later refused to take them too close to human settlements out of fear of being shot at by men whose sheep they have eaten. Still doesn't change that it was more or less random chance, but it does illuminate why the Eagles don't just show up at others' whims. They're autonomous and self-interested creatures, fitting with Tolkien's theme of the wild being a natural force in mythology. Bjorn and Treebird being two other examples of this. So this is a great comment. I do agree with it. It's another thing people are like, why didn't the Eagles just take the ring? It's like, well, Sauron had flying beasts surrounding his realm that would have attacked the Eagles. So the Eagles aren't going to just put themselves at risk for no reason. Also, if the entire land was covered with dark goblins, the Eagles would probably still be okay up in their little mountain habitats. So they're less part of the interplay of good and evil and more their own force of nature. So this idea that like the Eagles are, the Eagles kind of flew down suddenly, and that's kind of the flaw in The Hobbit, rather than having them be pre-established on some level. But they have their own reasons for doing stuff, and they don't necessarily come in to just do the bidding of Gandalf or anyone. They only really help Gandalf because Gandalf has a history of helping them. And actually, the Eagles are cited by some people. There's kind of like a fan theory that Gandalf is not Olorin, he's actually Manwë himself, and like the wizards don't have a great idea of who the other person is. I think that's kind of, there's evidence that that's not the case, mainly because Gandalf says that he doesn't have, facing one of his own order. He talks about people, or some things being stronger than him, and some things he hasn't been tested yet. Whereas if it was Manwë is like, he's like the supreme Valar. He's pretty powerful. So anyway, I just thought I'd mention that. There's a little bit of fan theory that Gandalf was actually Manwë. My cats have very few problems telling me what they're thinking. However, me being a cat person perhaps makes it easier for them. Okay, so on anthropomorphic animals, yeah, I get an idea of what my cats want, but not like, they don't express to me anything in language. Skip that one because I answered it. I thought I was the only one who cared about this. Any child needs to differentiate between a fantasy animal and a real animal. If the child cannot do that, we have a problem. And I think that's my warning to parents is like, you really have to make sure that you're framing stories for your kids. So, because stories contain a lot of messages, and it's really good to pre-filter messages, especially with young kids, because you don't always know how that message is going to affect them later on, or like what kind of biases it's going to create later on. So if kids are kind of going into life thinking that animals are thinking, feeling things that are really, really close to humans in their ability to comprehend death or things like that, then it really hampers any kind of possible logical debate or thought process you could have about animals and what rights should be afforded to them. Bat for Justice. I once saw someone filming a Star Wars movie in a theater with a camcorder years back. I did the right thing and reported them. I know that used music stores can also hurt artists. If stores were required to place a resale royalty on every used item sold, it might help. One thing the world needs to do is get the for-profit insurance companies out of business. There's no reason at all insurance money could not be given back for every show or venue without incident. I try not to buy used music at any venue. If I can, I will go direct to the artist and bypass the record pimp if possible. It was not hard for me to see that a lot of musicians were or are prostitutes for a recording pimp. So this is an interesting comment as well. So yeah, the piracy argument's always ongoing. The idea of when you buy a CD, you're not buying the CD, you're actually buying a license to listen to it is confusing to a lot of people because the property is actually intellectual, not physical. And the idea of charging money for a virtual product shouldn't be that complicated a thought in the 21st century, but a lot of people have trouble separating those two. It's like, well, I own the CD, I should be able to put it on at a concert. It's like, it doesn't work that way. That's not the way the law works, and it's really not the way intellectual property works. You're trying to create profit off somebody else's work, then you probably ought to pay them a royalty for that. The idea that there's sort of a limitless product, limitless number of copies when you pirate something, that's not true because there's a limited number of games that the market can produce. There's a limited number of CDs, movies that the market can produce, because it costs money and time to produce them. So if they don't get any reward for that, if the market's not willing to give them anything for that, then there'll be less supply of those in terms of how many movies are being made. So yeah, you are actually attacking the supply when you pirate something, because you're reducing the profitability of that. And also, when a person offers something up for sale, they're offering it as in whatever terms are either made explicit through law or sort of implicit with the way that you're selling it. And that means that if they're offering it for sale, then that means they're trying to recover some kind of value from it. So you really shouldn't pirate things. The other thing about record companies, this is something that goes back a long time. It really wasn't uncommon, even during like the big profit boom of the record industry in the 90s and 80s, for an artist to finish a recording cycle and owe the record company money. Because what would happen is the record company would give them an advance, not a big check, but an advance, like $100,000 advance, that the artist was supposed to take that money and use it on a recording. So the artist would use it on lots of things, including a recording. They'd go tour, and because of the arrangement with the record company, they'd end up owing the record company royalties on the songs that they performed. And then they'd owe the record company a percentage of all the merchandise that they sold, and on and on and on, until you realize that like they haven't recovered the money from the advance, because the part of the advance was not the royalties and everything that they still had to pay to the record company off of every piece of merchandise, every record that was sold. So it really wasn't uncommon for a lot of bands to just be in debt to a record company after several recordings and several tours. So the idea that, it used to be better, it's not necessarily the case, but now it's really bad, to where you can kind of see the writing on the wall. It's really unprofitable to do a lot of things in music now. You pretty much have to do it from the standpoint of either you're going to really approach it like a business, or you're going to really approach it like it's just an artistic endeavor and you don't care about the profit. There's not as much middle ground, I feel like, as there used to be, where you could be doing something you're very passionate about, playing a style that you really care about, and then also be able to make a living doing it. It's a lot harder than it used to be, but there's still ways to make money. There's bands like Wintersun. I'm actually wearing a Wintersun shirt right now. Boom! That crowdfund things like building a studio, something that they can then use that capital investment to record more albums more cheaply, and essentially support themselves while producing the music that the fans want to hear, and kind of doing an in-run around the recording business entirely. Because the record companies doing all the distribution, it gets very expensive for them as well. A lot of record companies are not as profitable as they used to be, and they a lot of them have folded over the last 20 years. So got to keep that in mind. So great comment. So if I like The Last Jedi, I have no morality. Is that all right? Well, I respectfully disagree. Well, that's a great straw man argument. I didn't make that, did I? There's lots of reasons why someone might like The Last Jedi, but The Last Jedi is lacking any kind of moral sense to it. None of the characters act with, except maybe Poe. Like, people have made the argument for Poe. So this is a great little straw man argument. I can just turn around and say, like, oh, so if you like The Last Jedi, you do have no morality. Why not? Or I can say, so what you're saying is that you liked The Last Jedi because you're stupid, and you're admitting that you're stupid. Well, I respectfully agree that you're stupid. There's lots of different pieces of rhetoric to respond to this. This isn't an argument. This is somebody imagining that I said something, or somebody intentionally giving a straw man. Trick question. What is One Punch Man? One Punch Man is a manga and anime series about an uber powerful superhero that suffers a crisis because nothing challenges him anymore. So he has an existential crisis. If there's no challenge to overcome, what is the meaning of existence? So I like One Punch Man for that reason. It takes the idea of like the Paragon and the or even a Mary Sue, and kind of turns it on its head and says, if someone was actually like this, what would that mean for them? And it would mean like an existence that's possibly devoid of meaning, because there's no challenge, there's no mountain to climb. In my humble opinion, regarding the rules breaking and stupid amazing coincidences, J.J. Abrams has no sense of scale. That's kind of true. Like, things are right next to each other, planets are blowing up. It's like, oh, there's a rebel base. There's no feeling that the galaxy is large and full of crazy things. This movie gave me a new appreciation for the prequels. It made me go back and evaluate the prequels as well, and do comparisons. What you're comparing it to changes pretty drastically what your outcome of opinion is going to be. And compared to the new ones, I think the prequels are awesome. Not flawless. There's big flaws in pretty much all of them, and I'll talk about those when I get to the analysis of those. But they're better in almost every sense. It's like you still have cardboard acting in the new ones. You just don't have any kind of story that goes with it, and the aesthetics are actually the aesthetics in Last Jedi are okay. I think they're what a lot of people wanted. I could still do without Jar Jar Binks' awkward and wooden romance dialogue, and I have the high ground, and yippee! That's one of these cringy pieces of dialogue that, like, George, why didn't you cut this? But they expanded the universe, inspired my imagination, and gave us Clone Wars. I would have been far more impressed with this movie if they'd flown to attack the Starkiller base and did not succeed in blowing it up for once. That would have been a twist, would have been a draw to see what happens in the next movie. Well, what would have happened, actually, if they hadn't blown up Starkiller base, this is actually an interesting thing, and I'm just thinking about it now. Starkiller base would have fired one more shot, and then the sun would have been dead. And then what do you do with a planet that's just drifting around, no center of gravity, doing nothing? Are you going to send an entire planet through hyperspace to another star to suck up, to blow up something else? Like, them succeeding or failing saved one planet, but even if they had failed, that would have been the end of Starkiller base, right? Because you wouldn't have been able to move it to another star. So yeah, they would have blown up the planet that the resistance or the rebellion or whatever it was on. But it seemed like the resistance had a lot of time to think about evacuating. They had enough time to send an attack. They probably could have just gone like, all right, well, you guys attack. Meanwhile, I'm going to get everyone off this. I'm going to get all of our personnel at least off this planet, put out a planetary, like, abandoned ship message. So if you guys fail, we'll minimize the losses. But they didn't. They just waited around like, man, I hope they succeed. It doesn't, it's kind of a repeat of the very first Star Wars movie. They don't, like, abandon the base. They probably could have, but I'm guessing if they were abandoning the base, they'd go right in front of a Death Star, and they wouldn't know what else to do. Let the past die. Kill it if you have to. The problem is that this project is more like a Walker version of Star Wars without soul. If we talk about nihilism in Star Wars, nothing is necessary and all is pointless. What do you live for, and what would you die for? Yeah. It's even worse now with The Last Jedi, yes. The fact that the female leaders are incompetent is how you can tell The Last Jedi is modern feminism. Going back to feminism. Feminism has become more about denigrating masculinity than promoting femininity. In a lot of circles, I think that's true. But again, I'm almost thinking there's just this other group, like the social justice warrior group, and that is intersectional feminism. Intersectional feminism is like, we're going to pull in all the victim status stuff from everybody, and we're going to have all of it under one feminist flag. So let's call it intersectional feminism, or maybe just social justice warriors. They literally believe that women are better at everything than men, to the point that women don't have to improve or prove that they're competent. They just are, and they are not to be questioned. This is why Rey is a Mary Sue, and why Admiral Holdo openly denigrates Poe in front of his peers, even though she later shows herself to be incompetent by letting most of the fleet get destroyed. This is why modern feminism is so toxic. They're so focused on hating men that they don't realize they're doing a poor job promoting women. And I do think they do a poor job promoting women, and I think I think a lot of modern intersectional feminists infantilize women. They make women into perpetual victims, and therefore incapable of doing anything of meaning. So this is I don't love to quote George W. Bush. He's not my favorite guy, but he called it the soft tyranny of low expectations. When you have something like affirmative action, you are essentially sending out the message that whatever group you are lowering the standards of entry to get, whatever group you're trying to get, you're essentially saying that the members of that group are incapable of actually being able to do the thing that you're having them do. They're incapable of having the qualifications to be in whatever industry you're deciding to put them into. And you are judging that entire group, not the individuals within that group, or you're judging all the individuals by their entire group, because that's how you're admitting them. You're admitting them based on their credentials as their group membership, rather than looking at their credentials in specific cases, like each person as an individual. So that's really what you're doing. It's like you're basically saying all women are incapable. If you're saying, well, we're gonna make sure we're gonna hire women even if they're unqualified to make sure we have more women because it's better to have more women, even though that's kind of a self-defeating argument, or there's nothing beneath that of substance. You're basically saying that women are inferior to men. You're like confirming all the misogynists say. Whereas the appropriate thing is you want to remove actual barriers and then let individuals make decisions about what they want to do. And for the most part, that's what happens. And men and women make different decisions. And so that's most of the difference between them. Real sexism, this is why they talk about systemic racism, systemic sexism, because they can't point out individual examples. They can't find people who are actually racist and sexist very often. And then when they do, it's usually manufactured racism or sexism. If somebody makes a joke about something and then that's like, well, you just screech and cry sexist and like blow them up on Twitter. P.S. The reason why I know this is because women are often portrayed the same way in current Marvel comics. They're often Mary Sues and are right even when they're wrong. Yeah, and the thing is, if you showed a woman being wrong or having struggled, then you might have the SJW mob attack you and try to get you fired and stuff like that. So I think there's a lot of fear there. But again, I don't want to paint everything like as feminism. And I think that's a slightly reductionist because, like I said in the previous video, most women I know identify as feminists and don't have that kind of social justice warrior agenda that there should be, or they think about the means of how you do it. It's like, how do we have more women in tech? And you go with like what James Damore said. Well, you offer more part-time positions because women who have children are more likely to enjoy a part-time position than a full-time 70-hour-a-week position. By catering the jobs so that only men without children can do them, or only men can do them, or women who will never have children, you're isolating a huge part of the female demographic. So if you offered different kinds of jobs, you might attract more women too. And that is a solution if you feel like it would be good to have more female representation in an industry for aesthetic reasons or something else, then you can do that. And I think that's up to an institution, but to suggest it and then get fired for it, that's essentially what you're up against if you toe the wrong narrative with some of these highly combative, like intersectional feminist types. But again, I don't want to paint all feminism. I've done anti-feminist content in the past, and it's fine. I just don't want to paint everyone with the same brush because there's going to be people that are saying, "Wait, I'm like that," and I don't believe that. It's like, well, I don't have a good word to like replace feminist. Maybe egalitarian. That's what some people are pushing for. So maybe say that. Luke could have been a paragon in The Last Jedi. He should have been. A series of random fan fictions. I don't know what that's in reference to. Luke could have been a paragon in TLG. He should have been. He should have taken on like the paragon role and been guiding the heroes. So what's One Punch Man? Okay, I just addressed that. I love your channel. Thank you. Metallica is the best metal band. Oh, this is my Metallica versus Megadeth little funny video. Megadeth was awesome from 1985 to 1995. They kept making good records into the 2000s, and then they really got bad. Like, I'd rather listen to Beyonce than Super Collider. Super Collider's not a Super Collider. I consider a mediocre album, and so is Risk. But Metallica hasn't really done much since like 1989 that's really good, or 1988 and Justice for All that's really good. They've done some mediocre stuff and some bad stuff, but they haven't done anything that's been nearly as good as some of those records that Megadeth did in the 2000s, like In Game, System Has Failed, United Abominations. Those three were really solid metal records in my opinion, and I like them. So especially In Game. In Game was great, and the new one, Dystopia, is really good too. When I was a tiny lad, I would always proclaim that I was going to eat worms. I don't know what that's in response to. Do not know that urban fantasy is its own genre. Oh, people? No, the critics. Wait, so the critics had a less knowledge about a film and story genres than the majority of the audience? Yes. So doesn't that seem like they have less know-how about movies than the audience? Again, how do they keep jobs writing about something they do not even care to hold valid and vast knowledge about? Or they're pretty good at using words they vaguely understand, or they only think they do, and building semi-professional political narratives fitting ongoing policy of their employers. but the movie's quality, it was never the main factor. So with this little sequence here, movie critics can come to their conclusions for a variety of reasons. Why do they still have their jobs? It's because if they're hired by like a website or a newspaper, the newspaper feels that they're adding value to it by having those reviews there, whether they're good or bad. Them not giving appropriate consumer information is the main thing. And it's because consumers are diverse and they have diverse tastes. The other thing I notice about most critics is they don't actually talk about stuff that can be kind of identified in a movie. They don't do enough analysis to really tell people why they think the way they do. They just kind of throw out some prose if they're writing an article about a movie that kind of is colorful and vaguely describes the movie and why they don't like it or why they like it, and doesn't really say anything specific about how it works or how it worked on them or what they liked and why. So there's a certain, I guess, culture to reviews that makes them kind of anti-informative and kind of plays to the way that people used to be entertained about reading about reviews. I try to go for a more analytical approach on this channel. So this is my Fantastic Beasts video. I liked Redmayne's acting, but I was kind of prepped before I saw the movie that the character was supposed to be on the spectrum. I don't know if there's any official statement corroborating that, but with the expectation, I think the character was portrayed very well. To agree with you on the rest, I kind of got the feeling that everyone else was feeding off that vibe and making their characters behave a little queerly. Yeah. It was kind of obvious that the closer the character was to Newt, the more screen time he shared, the worse it was, whereas secondary characters remain normal. I kind of likened it to how one person in a group, particularly one that's lofted as the leader or the main player, has some eccentricities that the others in the group start to pick up. Or maybe a better example, the new kid in an American classroom comes in with a British accent, and at least for a few days, some of the kids start trying to talk like them because it's cool. That all depends on the straw man of whether it was intentional or not, though. I don't think that's a straw man. It's just a question that we don't know because we don't know we can't read their mind, right? And that's the problem with talking about intent, is I can hypothesize, but I can't read someone's mind. I like the idea of an autistic man character that isn't the overdone savant idiot that has the condition of making it a very special story, so I'm not going to look it up and learn myself otherwise. So the main character in Fantastic Beasts acted really socially awkward all the time. I would not consider his behavior to be autistic. And that's because I work with autistic individuals. So I have experience with them. It didn't come off to me as autistic. It just came off as kind of like weird and awkward. Like somebody who is trying to act autistic, kind of like it didn't feel quite right. And overall, I think the movie was overall a failure, but it was really interesting to watch it and kind of see the second half of the movie got so much better than the first half was. And I think that there's probably some truth to, like, if they're sharing a lot of scenes with that character, if you're constantly redoing the same lines, you start to kind of play off what that person's doing and match their energy level. So somebody's like this all the time, you kind of start to be kind of emotionally shut off. And so there might be some truth to that, because I've kind of seen it in stage. Because stage, you're doing so much repetition. You're spending so much time with the other actors when you're doing stage acting. You're spending so much time with the script that it's really easy to end up having everybody have a similar set of mannerisms sometimes on stage, even if they aren't appropriate. And Mary Sue is an idealized. Okay, I explained this. I'm sick of hearing people say Rey is a Mary Sue without properly backing up that argument. I've backed it up on numerous occasions. There are only 2 points from The Force Awakens that could be used poorly to prove she's a Mary Sue: her power in the Force and her ability to fix the Millennium Falcon. Those are both big, though. It's not just that, and there's way more. It's the fact that Han immediately loves her and adores her. This person he just met wants her to be his apprentice. It's completely unrealistic. Leia hugs her instead of Chewie when she gets back with Han. She doesn't even know Han, and Leia doesn't know her. So the fact that the characters are just immediately besmitten with her is completely Mary Sue behavior. Everyone treats her like she's a little goddess on Earth. Her ability to use the Force is completely nonsensical, fits nothing with the canon. The rest of this is just going to be garbage because this person is trying to defend their emotional feelings about something. You're wrong, and goodbye. And we're going to flag the YouTube comment. Don't advertise other channels on my channel. Goodbye. Make no mistake, this works vice versa. Humans are very much animals. That's true. So let's talk about anthropomorphic animals. Like, humans don't always have predictable behavior. I think I'm a taxi driver, and the things I've encountered since I started have been life-changing for me. I view humanity completely differently now. The nature of people in my eyes has been entirely unmasked. It very much frightens me. Our comprehension, logic, and language capabilities may be far beyond what other animals, but we are still hopeless apes. However, it is our utmost obligation to protect and preserve nature where possible. Regardless of other animals not experiencing complex emotions or thoughts, it is clear to see that they experience pain, fear, joy, etc. This is why our duty, being the more evolved being, to avoid causing suffering where possible and not treating other animals as things that were placed here for our own benefit and nothing more. So now I am going to dissect this one a little bit because it's a really interesting comment. So, humans don't always have predictable behavior. Humans are capable of evil and things like that. But the very nature of evil is a human, something that only humans can perceive or interact with. And going to like animal rights, first of all, pain, fear, joy, etc. We know that animals might fear pain because they react to it. Fear, they might react to it. Joy, we kind of impress upon those, but we don't know the nature of those or how those affect the psychic status of the animal. We know if we subject a human individual to lots of fear, they get like post-traumatic stress disorder and other things, but we're not entirely sure how that works with animals, because animals can't communicate in-depth feelings, and they don't have any kind of theory of mind. They also don't operate in any kind of moral sense. So whenever you're talking about animal rights, you have to think about first, it's our utmost obligation. From which does that obligation arise? Does it arise from God? Does God declare it to us? Does it arise from first principles somehow? Does it arise? Where does that obligation come from? And you hear this with some people kind of saying it's your duty to do this, it's your duty to do that, without kind of explaining it. It's like it's your duty. It's like from whence? From whence does this duty come? From where does it arise? And most of the time you're going to skip over that and not answer that question. So in this case, what we have is an argument that people are apes, that people are animals, right? So it's saying that people are not the same as animals. But we know that merely us being able to make an argument that humans are like animals is pretty different from what animals do. Humans are very different from other animals, less, cognitively aware beings. And you really have to recognize that. And just as an example, like if we want to use rights, and there's so much more below that would have to establish this conversation, but we'll just start from the point of rights. If you say that, like, I have a right to life, what you're basically saying is I have a right to have other people not kill me, and other people have the right to life, and they don't kill you and you don't kill them, right? So there's kind of like an agreement, a social agreement that you're not going to kill each other. What do we do with people that don't respect other people's rights? Well, we revoke their rights. So if somebody is not respecting the rights of others, they get their rights removed. If you steal from someone, you go to jail, you lose your rights of freedom and all those sorts of things. That's kind of the way that society's established the idea of crime and how justice and punishment ends up being played out. So when you think about it from those terms, an animal is literally incapable of respecting the rights of any other living being. The idea that humans can elect to be vegetarian is a uniquely human trait. That humans can say, like, I think it's morally wrong to kill animals. That's a uniquely human stance, because wolves don't think that way. Wolves happily eat whatever they feel like eating that is yummy to them. They eat rabbits or bear cubs or whatever they want, and they don't have a second thought about it because that's in their nature for that to do. So if they don't respect the rights of humans, if a wolf will eat a human without a second thought, and for every dog that cries by its master's side, there's one that happily devours him. I don't remember who that quote's from, but probably one of my teachers. So yeah, if a wolf doesn't respect your rights, then the wolf doesn't have the same rights. It can't. So diminished responsibilities, and you say, well, the wolf is just acting on instinct. Okay, well, his responsibility to his actions is severely diminished. Therefore, his rights are severely diminished. And that's an interesting way to think about the way animal rights ought to be viewed. You can, I'm for like humane. Obviously, I have pets and I treat them humanely, and I don't torture them or anything. And I've worked in agriculture, and I've worked at a slaughterhouse, and I've never felt like we killed the animals inhumanely or something like that, but ultimately they were created to be meat, and they don't have a thought about dreading the future of death. They have no thoughts about the afterlife, and they wouldn't think twice about killing someone else of their own species if it benefited them. So to impress upon them the results of moral inquiry when they are incapable of moral inquiry, I believe is not correct. So to impress upon them rights when they're incapable of respecting rights is against even what we have human standards for, the way that we apply the standards to humans. So that's, I don't know, that's a long diatribe, but there you go. Sees long fingernails on the right hand. Yes, guitars in the background. I'm definitely play guitar and lute. I'm glad you can hear both ears. I am too. Yes, this is a classical guitar channel too. I'll have more content coming. I have some stuff maybe planned for this year that I think will be pretty cool, as far as like having some guitar courses and things that are a little more organized for people to work through and develop some skills that they want to learn. This is on Ferdinand. I remember the story was that Ferdinand was a pacifist from the beginning, and the whole reason he was even put in the bullfight was because of a misunderstanding. I think it was like a bee sting on the original one. It made them think he was crazy. I never really saw it as being anti-male myself, as much as it was the misfit who doesn't care about the rest of the world. Of course, the original book was very, very short indeed. He gets mistaken for a suitable bullfight. A bull, but doesn't do anything. They send him home, and got another one who was willing to fight. So yeah, that's this adaptation. It's very clear that, like, you know, Ferdinand appeals to like the matador's, I don't know, sense of humanity, and the matador decides to let him live, which is different from the book where it's like, this bull's not fighting. Just get rid of him. It's no fun. We'll get someone else who will fight. So anthropomorphic stuff. This happens to me all the time. Our dog is so passive and well-behaved that other dogs just attack all the time. See, my dog is like 10 pounds and barks at other dogs and makes them mad. So I have my dog on a leash. Partly, she is not capable of hurting another person, but to protect her. So I've had a German Shepherd attack my dog before, and pull that dog up, protect her from this German Shepherd. So the leash is also for me to control the animal in a dangerous situation. Was the original operation painful during or after it was performed? I'll answer that one directly. Then talking about having my abutment put in for my hearing aid. It was painful afterwards. Mostly it was like I was super nauseous for a week because cranial surgery just messes with you, and I had like leakage out of my ears. Weird. Very surprised to find a YouTuber that speaks of nihilism and postmodernism. I had an interesting discussion of TLJ about this. He was speaking of inversion. The malaise in TLJ is deeper than light is dark and dark is light. I agree with you about nihilism and the people who can accept it. My dad taught me to ask, what do you live for and what do you die for? A true nihilist is a sociopath. Yeah. Lots of people have been coming on being like, I'm a nihilist and I believe this. It's like, you're not a nihilist. You're ascribing to standards. Therefore, you're not a nihilist. You can't argue for nihilism without adhering to some kind of moral standard. The new Blade Runner is the best movie of 2017. You're missing. This is a thing where people are like, see the new Blade Runner. I'm like, I can't. I don't want to. It's not a sequel I care about. And actually, let me make a quick thing on that. So, like, the reason I didn't really want to see the new Blade Runner is partly because I like the original Blade Runner, and I also saw no reason to have a follow-up, a sequel of any kind to the original Blade Runner. So that right there made me not want to see it. You know, Ridley Scott wasn't directing it. You know, Philip K. Dick didn't write a follow-up story for them to base it on. So I just wasn't very interested. But also, sequels are more about the characters than they are the plot. The reason we like sequels is because people really love characters. They love great characters, and you want to see those characters continue to do stuff. Well, Deckard is fine, but I have no attachment to Deckard from Blade Runner. So I have no reason to want to see him in a movie. I never thought, like, man, I wish they would do a sequel. I want to see Deckard do more stuff. Deckard, he's not a bad character or anything, but it just doesn't resonate as a character that I want to see do more the way like Luke Skywalker is, or someone like that. Naruto proves children don't need Mary Sue's. Okay. I don't watch Naruto, so I don't really know. This is about architect versus gardener. Yeah, so this person's kind of splits architect and gardener, 51-49. I think it's good to know where your story's going to go. And I always think it's good to leave yourself some wiggle room, because you may be executing the story and realize your original plan wasn't quite right, and you can kind of tweak it to make it a little better. I think audiences, this is on Can Critics Be Trusted? I think audiences are less able to critically analyze a piece of work, a work of art. There, I said it. I don't think Last Jedi was really great or perfect, but it seems like critics can point out that it was a well-made film. It was technically proficient, but it was, in terms of story, it was not technically proficient. It was visually technically proficient, but the story was awful. And then its relationship to the rest of the movies was insulting. A lot of people who hate it seem to hate it mostly for the changes not being ones they liked, although they're legitimate grievances. So I don't like it for the changes, right? So I don't like it as a fan. But the story was also just awful. It was just a terribly executed story, and really there was no story in it. There really wasn't a story in Last Jedi the way that there is in most other Star Wars films. There was no objective really, other than like, we got to get away from this fleet that's chasing us. And Rey's like, I'm here to train, and Luke's like, nah, and then she's like, okay, I'll leave. Like the any kind of serviceable plot goals don't seem to happen or be clear the way they are in other ones. And the main thing I think about, like if you compare it to Empire Strikes Back, most of the plot goals in Empire Strikes Back were Vader's plot goals. It's kind of like the Vader movie. It's about Darth Vader trying to catch Luke Skywalker, and that's the main plot goal. And so Luke's goals of like, I want to be a Jedi, are really secondary to the main plot goal, which is Vader trying to catch Luke Skywalker. Interesting way to think about it. The same guy commenting the same basic thing. So we'll have this one be the last one because this is going on for a long time and there's still stuff from yesterday. The next thought is, what if that had been my child? Exactly. Oh, this is great. I read this one. Exactly this happened to us. You do not want this experience. I know. Having a dog attack your child. It's all. Please keep your pets on a leash. There's actually a couple. I'll probably do a couple video responses to this particular anthropomorphic animals one. Our son was about 18 months when we were walking down our street with our dog, and a neighbor dog came bowling over a wall at us. He slashed my son in the face on the way down with his canines, knocking him over, and then bit him in the lower back and picked him up off the ground. I was holding the leash and I threw it down as soon as I saw what was happening. This all happened in about a second. Our dog, who is a goddamned hero, leapt right at the son of a bitch's throat, instantly forcing the other dog to drop my son. Our dog attacked him so viciously that he immediately tried to turn around and jump back over the wall, but our dog literally pulled him down 3 times and held him in a corner until the owner finally came out of the house, and we managed to separate them. As soon as my son was dropped, my 3-month pregnant wife went to the ground to protect him with her body and get him away. Super mama bear reflexes. I was just trying to keep myself physically between my family and the dogs until we could get the neighbor dog under control. Fortunately, the puncture wounds missed vital targets. Toddlers are surprisingly resilient, and the neighbors voluntarily surrendered their monster of an animal to be destroyed. So all's well that ends well. We just moved out of that neighborhood for good. My dog is sleeping under my legs right now. I cannot be prouder of him. He's a 10-year-old neutered shepherd mutt with bad knees, and the other dog was a 2-year-old pit mix in the prime of his youth, and was easily 5-pound weight advantage. But my dog kicked his ass, and my son is alive and unmaimed because of him. Needless to say, we're a little more vigilant these days when it comes to ill-contained dogs. Yes, I think it's like whenever you have your dog off a leash. So people have said this. I've had a couple things like, you can totally predict animal behavior. Everybody who walks their dog without a leash thinks that they have a dog that will not do what it's about to do. So everybody who walks their dog without a leash thinks that they're capable of predicting their animal's behavior and that their animal's not going to do the bad thing that it ends up doing. That's why they're always surprised. Now, the thing is, if you walk your dog with a leash, that's a safeguard against any kind of unexpected situation that you haven't planned for. That dog can encounter all kinds of things it's never seen before that can provoke instinctual reactions that you are not prepared to deal with. But if you have a leash on it and something unexpected does happen, you have the leash there to control the dog and protect your dog, or to protect your dog from a child or another dog. If you have a toddler run up and hit your dog with a stick, you still don't want your dog to attack that toddler, but that might be his natural instinctual reaction, and a correct reaction for him in nature is to fight back, and you actually don't want that. So I that's a great story. People who've never been bitten, or at least never witnessed a full-on dogfight, don't understand how much control a dog exhibits in its normal behavior, nor what is lurking just under the surface. Great comment. Thanks for sharing your story, and I'm glad your kid made it out relatively unscathed. I am too. That's a really, really frightening and horrific situation. Back to my other point, and I'll probably find some other comments that say this. Someone's like, I'm a horse trainer and you can ride a horse without a bridle and without spurs. I remember this comment. And that's true. And I didn't say you can't. I just said I wouldn't. And the reason is because if I'm riding a horse somewhere, I can't predict everything that's going to happen in the environment. You hear stories about like potato chip bag flies over the road when the horse is in a parade. The horse throws the rider, freaks out. Well, if you have some means of restoring control over that animal, that's a good safeguard. If you're wearing spurs, you don't necessarily have to use them, although it might be hard to do your heels gently, but you can get gentle spurs and things like that. It's mainly like having a safeguard so you can control an animal in the event that it's unpredictable. And everybody who does these sorts of things, walks a dog without a leash or trusts a horse to ride without a saddle or any kind of equipment, they come from their perspective, they feel like they're in control of the situation. But every situation where something unexpected happens, the dog chases down a kid, the dog attacks another dog, that's always unexpected to the person who didn't have the dog on the leash. And then, of course, there's always equestrian accidents. I can't think particularly of ones that happen with like bareback horse riding because I don't read a whole lot of them, but there are accidents that happen in equestrian riding, often due to rider error. But the point is that if you assume that you are able to do everything without the need of those extra devices, everyone who does that assume it has the same point of view, and then they get surprised. So I always come from the point of view like, even if I'm really good and I really know my dog well, I still probably would have a leash just in case, because I know the own flaws in my own perspective and my own ability to correctly predict all possible circumstances, right? So that's all I'll say about that for now. Don't be the person who assumes that you know it all. Always prepare. It's always a good idea to just have a safeguard, even if you're really, really good at being able to manage horse behavior or something without having to use a bridle or anything like that. Me personally, I'm not an experienced horse rider or anything, but like even if I was, I'd probably like, well, it's probably better to have that extra safety bit just in case. So anyways, have a good day. I'll see you next time. New books are out. If you catch typos and stuff, please, please let me know, because I really do. I do really want to make sure that future editions of these are nice. And I will be coming out with an edition later in the year that has all three of these books in one nice thick volume for you. These are obviously rather small books. They're like mini books. But I thought I'd try this out for marketing. So you can check these out. You can get the ebooks for free if you hop on my mailing list, dvspress.com/list. And that'll give you the ebook versions, and you can buy the paperbacks. They're $3.99 a piece, except for the last one, which is $4.99, and that's due because it's a bigger book and it costs a little more to print. So have a great one, and I will see you guys next time.